America has already had to get used to one man breaking the usual political rules.
You got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Right now, they might have to get used to another.
The next president of the United States, Michael Bloomberg.
Michael Bloomberg's hoping to be chosen as the Democratic presidential nominee this November. And here's why that's odd. He's not actually a Democrat. He was Republican mayor of New York 3 times. He hasn't been part of the race so far, steering clear of the early states voting in Iowa and New Hampshire. But he's been making his presence felt like this.
Well, we didn't get it right the last time, but hindsight is 20/20.
Spending more on the airwaves war, television and radio, than every other candidate put together. His power to spend has been breathtaking.
Hello, Nashville.
And that's because his wealth, at $68 billion or so, dwarfs that of Donald Trump and makes him one of the richest men in the world. Wealth built on Wall Street and Bloomberg News.
People are saying, do we need yet another billionaire in the race?
Wait a second. Who's the other billionaire?
So is a rich, elderly billionaire the man Democrats want to represent them this time round. The clear frontrunner in the race thus far, Bernie Sanders, thinks not.
We are a democracy, not an oligarchy. You're not going to buy this election.
Sanders is the most left-leaning candidate in the race, and he's proving popular with the young, with students, with Hispanic voters, and crucially, he has a strong activist base willing to go the extra mile to get his message out. Tonight will be the first time that Mike Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders face each other off on a national debate stage, and you can expect fireworks. You can expect to hear critics lay into Bloomberg's stop and search policy that ended up targeting young black males when he was mayor, a policy for which he's now apologised, but one with which candidate Trump fervently agreed back in 2016.
Well, one of the things I'd do, Ricardo, is I would do stop and frisk. I think you have to. We did it in New York. It worked incredibly well, and you have to be proactive.
You may also hear candidates laying into him for his language around women employees, old-fashioned and outdated to some ears, downright objectionable to others. In return, Bloomberg has just one mantra to repeat. He'll tell the stage he is the only one who can beat Trump at his own game, and he's prepared to spend the money to chase him out of the White House. Is that tempting enough for Democrats to hold their nose and throw their weight behind him? Or will they feel that's selling their soul?
Happy holidays. I'm Mike Bloomberg, and I approve this message.
Well, to discuss the battle for the Democratic nomination further, we're joined from Palo Alto by UCL's Thomas Gift, who can tell us why he thinks Michael Bloomberg is the Democrat perhaps best placed to take on Trump. He doesn't have a dog in the race. And from New Orleans by Nathan Robinson, who's a diehard Bernie Sanders fan. Thomas, to you first of all, Bernie Sanders has opened up this very clear lead at the moment. Is that enough to see him push through to the end, do you think?
Well, I do think that you have to say at this point, Bernie Sanders is the clear frontrunner. He did exceptionally well both in Iowa and New Hampshire. He also has a very significant ground game in the rest of the states still to go. His voters are mobilized, and he also appeals to a broad swath of the Democratic Party, including independent-minded Democrats as well as more traditional progressives. So I do think that you have to say, at least at this point, that he is the clear frontrunner.
And he is best served to beat Donald Trump when it comes to the November election?
Well, that I'm not so sure. I think it's very difficult to predict who would actually win in general elections. You can look at the polling data, and the most recent poll from the Wall Street Journal, NBC News, shows that Michael Bloomberg actually has a 7 percentage point lead in a head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump. Sanders has a 4% lead. Now, of course, that's just a national poll that isn't actually looking at some of the key swing states where this election will ultimately be determined. But certainly Bloomberg is trying to make the case that a moderate with lots of money to spend is best positioned to beat Donald Trump come election.
Nathan, do you think that if Bernie Sanders doesn't make the ticket, his fans will nevertheless hold their nose and vote for somebody like a Bloomberg?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all, because Michael Bloomberg's record is repulsive to people on the left. He's been anti-homeless, he terrorized African Americans as mayor of New York, surveilled Muslims, has a horrendous record of sexist and transphobic comments. In fact, a lot of people on the left, people who are the millions and millions of people who support and come out for Bernie Sanders, are going to feel insulted. It's going to feel like a slap in the face to have a billionaire, a Republican billionaire, come along and buy the nomination. I think you'll see millions defect for a third party. They're not, why would they, they'll feel like, why should they show up on election day when elections can just be bought? I think you're going to see a real lack of enthusiasm. You shouldn't nominate someone who people have to hold their nose to vote for. That's what Hillary Clinton tried to say. Didn't work for her. I think it'd be an even worse situation with Mike Bloomberg as the nominee.
So could Bloomberg, Thomas, to you, win if the left all go elsewhere? I mean, could he bring in cross-party Republican support, and is there enough centrist support to get him over the line?
That's what he's hoping, that he can appeal to some Republicans, those who aren't enamored with Trump's policies. He's also hoping, though, of course, that he can motivate that base, or at least that the base would end up showing up precisely because they want nothing more than to get Donald Trump out of office. I mean, that's certainly a risk that they won't show up. And we saw in 2016, Bernie Sanders didn't exactly give his full endorsement for Hillary Clinton as he was going up against Trump. I think there was a lot of resentment when that campaign ended. And so it is possible, and perhaps even likely, that some of these Sanders supporters won't show up come election. But, you know, I still think if there's this choice between 4 more years of Donald Trump and Bloomberg, who certainly isn't the first choice of a lot of Democrats, I still think a lot of these people will, as you said, hold their nose and say, OK, we'll cast this ballot for
Nathan,
Bloomberg.
Britain is quite we're a pretty small country, but we do feel, in a sense, like we have been through a mirror image of what America is going through now. We had a 70-year-old socialist, very active, very popular amongst the young, who energized his base, who absolutely crashed when it came to the election. Why doesn't America cast an eye across the ocean and see that that same thing could happen with a country that is presumably much less socialist than ours?
Well, Corbyn didn't lose because he was too far to the left. In fact, we can see that in the polls. People actually like Labour's left-wing policies. There were strategic mistakes. Brexit was a very difficult position to be in. But actually, the public, both in Britain and in the United States, favours left-wing policies. Bernie Sanders is
well, they didn't enough to vote
popular.
for him.
He's the most popular politician in the country. Well, but that had nothing to do with how left-wing he was. Those are strategic mistakes. Bernie Sanders is doing very, very well in the polls. He's very, very popular. His agenda is popular. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. In fact, Donald Trump is running in a very strong economy. I think any candidate is going to have a difficult time beating him. But I don't actually think there is data to support the idea that that running too far to the left is what costs you.
Thomas,
I think having an unclear message is what costs you. Having a bad strategy, not being able to motivate people to go out to the polls, not being able to organize people, that is what really hurts you. And that's why we need Bernie Sanders as the nominee.
Thomas, you're being told that America could happily accept a socialist like Bernie Sanders.
Well, I'm not so sure about that because I think, you know, to use an American football analogy, American politics is really played between the 40-yard line. I think at the end of the day, it's primarily a moderate enterprise. And I do think that a concern that a lot of Democrats have is, you know, a self-styled democratic socialist may have a ceiling on his or her support. And so in the case of Bernie Sanders, I just don't know if there are a lot of individuals who self-identify as socialists or consider themselves to that far left wing of the party. Certainly a very devoted and committed core of supporters, but that's not where the majority of Americans sit. And I think this is particularly challenging for Bernie Sanders precisely because, you know, the economy is doing well in the United States. Granted, all of the benefits aren't being equally distributed, and you could make the argument that these benefits are primarily accruing to the 1%. But in an economy where unemployment is around 3 to 4%, I think it's a particularly hard sell for a self-styled democratic socialist.
Thomas Giff, Nathan Robinson, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.